Hey guys, and welcome on into the next NHL season preview show. And today we're here to talk all about the Toronto Maple Leafs, looking at their off-season additions and subtractions, upcoming free agents for next year, possible lineup, team future bets, and player future bets. And to talk all about the Leafs, I brought in Zach Phillips, who came on last year's show, which was a great success, which was awesome to see. You can find him at Zach Phil on Twitter/X. Link is the description below. Zach, for people that haven't seen you before, give them a brief introduction of yourself.
Yeah, first, I appreciate you having me back on here, Terry. It was fun to do last year, break everything down. I think, as people will realize, more than anything, I just love talking about the Leafs. Kind of goes to what I do. I work for the Leafs Nation, doing post game shows with them. I fill in every now and then, doing morning shows alongside like Nick Alberga and Jay Rosehill and those kinds of guys. Carter Hutton hopping on there, Anthony Stewart. And then on top of that, I work for the Hammer Betting Network, hosting a daily NHL pick show and producing some of the other sharp sports betting content, college football content that we've got on the network over there as well.
Awesome. Sorry about that. We're going to jump right into the first segment here, which is additions and subtractions. And the Leafs have a pretty big list here. When you look at the off-season moves, a lot of subtractions, some additions as well. I'll start here with this segment, and I'll start as I always do with the subtractions list, which is obviously a big list here. Not going to go over every guy on the list. I'm just going to kind of touch on some of the big departures. I guess Ilya Samsonov is a big departure. I don't know if he ever really, I don't want to say fit in, but he never cemented himself as the starting goalie for Toronto.
Yeah.
And things just didn't work out for him. So he's moving on. TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, Labushkin, Edmondson, Muzzin. Klingberg didn't really play much at all. But the Leafs are revamping their defense. A lot of defensive guys leaving here, but a lot of these guys are old.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys are old, and you're bringing in young guys, which I definitely think is the right move there. Tyler Bertuzzi, I think, is the biggest loss on this subtractions list that the Leafs are going to really miss this year. I think Bertuzzi would be the guy. Sheldon Keefe, Craig Berube. I absolutely love the Craig Berube hiring by the Leafs.
Yeah.
I'm really high on him coming in here. I think he's the perfect coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs needed. So I'm very high on that move. Sheldon Keefe. We'll see how he does this year. He's the favorite to win the Jack Adams Award, which is a little bit surprising, but with the New Jersey, it makes sense. Looking at the additions, when you get rid of a whole bunch of defensemen, you got to expect that defensemen are coming in. Chris Tanev, a defensive, stay-at-home defensive defenseman. Um, totally makes sense why the Leafs would go after him. Yes, a lot of people are complaining about his contract and the length and all that, but um, we're looking at short term here with this segment, and short term adding Chris Tanev is a huge win for this Leafs team. Oliver Ekman Larson, who a lot of people had written off to be finished, had a very good season last year with Florida. Hakanpää's coming in here as kind of a depth defenseman. Dakota Mermis and Philip Myers, kind of the same deal. Obviously, watching Dakota Mermis in Minnesota, he's definitely not a liability. If he somehow does get some time playing with the Leafs, not a liability at all. Touched on Craig Berube, how much I like that signing or the hiring there. Anthony Stolars. That is kind of the big wild card, I think, here for the Leafs. We'll touch a little bit on when we talk about player future bets at the end of the show, but Anthony Stolars had an absolutely amazing season last year with Florida. Much better than his previous time with Anaheim. Um, so, how many starts is he going to get? Who's the starter for the Leafs? Could there be a goalie controversy? Um, Lots of questions here. Zach, additions and subtractions. What do you think here about the Leafs offseason?
I think it was good other than really up front. You touched on Tyler Bertuzzi. That's a loss. Not having Tyler Bertuzzi return is a loss. That was a guy that I wanted back. I was disappointed when they weren't able to get that deal done. Obviously, they kind of looked in other areas, and when you're going to pay Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, Marner, and those guys up front, it's going to take away some of the money that you can spend elsewhere in the team. And they decided this was the year that they were going to try to allocate that money to defense and upgrading that for the first time in what's felt like a long time. Like Kyle Dubas under his tenure here, whether it was him or Shanahan is yet to be determined, but under those guys, they focus more on forwards and plug and play pieces in the group of six outside of Morgan Riley. And then you look at the rest of the forwards, and it was who can fit in here on cheap contracts. Tyler Bertuzzi, Max Domi, those are some of the steps we saw under Brad Treliving towards, hey, let's try to get some actual pieces up there to complement those guys up front. And he started to work on the defense a little bit. Now, naturally, you're going to have to make some sacrifices. Bertuzzi goes out the door. That one, to me, stings. But I like the Chris Tanev signing. I like adding Ekman Larson. I like adding these big guys like Yanni Hakanpää to come in here, who obviously is going to be a depth guy. But it just kind of changes the outlook and makes things very definitive of what this team wants to be and wants to do. What do you think Oliver Ekman Larsson's here for? He's here to be an offensive defenseman who can run the power play. It's very clear that Brad Treliving and the previous coaching staff weren't all that thrilled with Morgan Riley. It's running power play one. It's not like they were pissed off or anything, but you get to the playoffs, you had struggles. Let's change things up. Here's a guy who just won the Stanley Cup, was helping run one of the more successful power plays in Florida. Bring him in here. Maybe he could be the guy who's going to take that. Chris Tanev, Yanni Hakanpää. You're bigger, you're meaner, you're harder to play against, and Morgan Riley now has a definitive. Number one's the wrong way to phrase this because he's not a number one defenseman. He's the number one person to fit in the number two spot. He's got a definitive number two to play alongside him in Chris Tanev. You short up some of the stuff there. I think that helps. The other thing, and just to touch on as well, would be you brought up Ilya Samsonov and kind of debating, going back and forth. You said it, Terry, like, is this a big loss? It is in the fact that he was your front-facing goaltender. He was the guy, like, when you look at things at the end of the day, Ilya Samsonov is your number one. Is it a big loss in terms of what you lose from a production standpoint or from what you lose in terms of consistency? Probably not. So debating between name factor and just kind of the identity of the position, yeah, it's a loss, but from what he was bringing, I mean, we're not talking about losing, Henrik Lundqvist or like Shesterkins and these kinds of guys. You see Saros from the program and saying, what the hell are we going to do back there now? It's not that kind of a loss. And on the flip side, Anthony Stolarz, like, if you were to tell me that he's going to be the same level of project as what Ilya Samsonov was when he came here, I'd say that that's okay, and I think he's better than that. So that's kind of where I'm at as a fan and someone who's evaluating this team when I look at the goaltending position. Like, when Samsonov came, I just said, okay, we'll see what it is. I'm fine with this. I think Stolarz is ahead of that. I think that there's some degree of project because he's not being a number one, but all in all, I'm actually pretty impressed with it. And the final kind of piece is the Craig Berube. It's yet to be determined, really, whether Sheldon Keefe is a good, great, terrible coach, whatever, because, yeah, you could say he got handed this incredible group of players, but you do also have to coach them to that. They did lack success in the playoffs. How much of that is him? How much of that is the guys that were on the ice? I'm just excited to have a new voice, and the biggest part of this is that it's not just a new voice, it's a new message. It's a new style of play. It's a new character building type of coach. It's a different culture change in the locker room. That's what I'm excited to see, and whether or not these players that are in there right now are capable of adapting to this.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree with everything you said. I completely agree. Um, we'll move on along to upcoming free agents. And of course, when you see the big list of guys coming in, um, a lot of the time, if you've got a big additions and subtractions list, you don't always have a big upcoming free agents list. Looking at it, no goalies. Both the goalies are signed to multi-year deals, so nobody expiring this upcoming season. Um, Zach, I'll let you start first with this one. Forwards and defensemen. Who do you think the Leafs should be re-signing? Of course, with John Tavares and Mitch Marner both unrestricted free agents, it's really interesting to hear your thoughts. Who should the Leafs be focusing on re-signing? Who would you be okay with them letting go elsewhere?
Well, I'll save maybe the most interesting one for last. John Tavares, I'd like to come back. I want him to come back. That's obviously going to be dependent on how much money he's willing to take and how much money the Leafs are willing to give him. Everyone here in Toronto talks about, well, Tavares will take less money. He'll take a 50% discount on his contract or more to come back here. We don't know that. Like, he might not do that. He might not be interested in doing that. Mind you, I am of the opinion that he's going to be more inclined to come back here. I don't think it's anything to save reputation necessarily, but just kind of consider what happened. He's the kid who came home. He got the captaincy. He ripped the hearts out of people in Long Island. You relocated your family. You've grown some stuff here. It's not just about being here in Toronto and having family close by. It's actually building his family here in the city. It's building these other things that he's got roots in here in the city now too. Those are kind of some of those pieces that I look at with this guy and like, hey, I think he's going to want to stay. Dewar, I liked what he brought at the end of last season. You're much more familiar with him than probably even I am at this point, just because of how long you got to see him out there in Minnesota. But Dewar was interesting to me. Let's wait and see how this season pans out before we make a decision on whether or not we want to bring him back, how much he's worth. And it also is kind of going to depend on what we do with some of the other guys. Like, what is going to happen with Yarn Croak? What's going to happen with David Kampf? Because then if those decisions might influence the Dewar one. Nyes, got to return him. You have to sign this guy. I don't care if it's here before the season, during the season, end of season. I don't care. It has to be done. Pontus Holmberg starts to fit a little bit more into the doer category there, but I like what he brings depending on this season. Mitch Marner. Terry. Mitch Marner is an incredible hockey player. I'm not going to dispute that ever. The debate that I get in with people all the time is, well, you lose Mitch Marner. How do you replace 99 points? How do you replace all the skill and the power play talent? For me, I've seen it long enough. I've seen the results go the exact same way with him and with the whole team when it matters the most. I'm ready to walk away. I'd rather obviously make a trade and not lose him for nothing, but I'm ready for Mitch Marner's time here in Toronto to kind of come to an end. If he extends, sure. I would much rather that not be the case because, first of all, I think you could do a lot with that money. I think you could upgrade maybe defense. You could maybe go get a stud goaltender. Maybe you go and get two pieces to fill into what his spot is. And those guys don't have to add up to 99 points. That's what people don't understand. They just have to bring a different component to the game because maybe Austin Matthews can score 120 points and William Nylander can score 105 points. And then it doesn't matter anymore because you can fill that in other places. You need something different. You need the team to look and feel different. And I feel like he's just kind of one of those pieces. He's the lightning rod that we look at and say, that is what we're trying to get away from when it matters the most. I'm ready to move on. As for the defenseman there, McCabe, I want him back. Want him to be healthy this season. Want to see where he's at and how much he's going to ask for. Timmins, Hakanpää. I mean, I'm not going to really be able to give you much there. I'm not going to lie. Those are kind of just pieces. I'm like, hey, they come back, they come back. They don't. But give me another year and let's see what happens with those guys as well.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll start with the defenseman depth guys. I don't want to say easily replaceable, but there's going to be other
But they
guys
are
on the
kind of.
free. Yeah, yeah, other guys in the free agency market that you can go and get if you need to. Jake McCabe. Um, I don't want to be like acting like I'm a Jake McCabe expert, but probably a guy you try to want to you would want to keep around next year. Um, Matthew Nyes, I have his picture on the screen because I thought, looking at this list, of course you've got Tavares and Marner, um, but Matthew Nyes is that RFA. He's that younger guy. He's the future. He's definitely somebody you want to resign. With Connor Dewar, he's not going to break the bank. He's
Yeah.
not going to be an expensive contract. He's a good penalty killer, a good depth guy. So I could see the Leafs re-signing him, but he's not going to break the bank. You pay Matthew Nyes, and then if Tavares and Marner both go, that's a lot of money um, that you can use to get cheaper players that obviously may not have the same history as both of these guys. But I have to be careful how I say this. Marner, if he when he goes, if he was to go on to a different team, let's say Marner goes to LA. Let's just say LA. I would be willing to bet that he doesn't put up the numbers that he did in Toronto in LA. He is a very good player, and he's still going to be a very good player on a different team. But I think if you take him away from the guys he's been playing with here in Toronto, and you put him on another team that doesn't have those guys, I think you're going to see a decrease, uh, somewhat significant in his point total. So
Interesting.
I agree with you. Uh, if Marner is not willing to take a discount, like a somewhat significant discount, you can't have your cap space signed into four guys. I think the Leafs should have learned this the last few years now.
Yeah.
That's not something you should be doing. So we'll see. We'll see how this goes. This is one of the really interesting things is what the Leafs do here with Tavares and Marner. Uh, I can't let them see letting Marner go to free agency. I feel like with a guy like him, you gotta kind of get something for him. I'm sure someone at the trade deadline would definitely be willing to trade for him.
Mm-hmm.
But it's whether or not the Leafs see him um, in this year's playoff run, if they want to keep him around. So many question marks
Well, and
with
whether or not
Tavares.
he would want to go to the team that would the trade would kind of come up to, right? Because he's got the final say there.
Yeah, that's true. We'll move on to possible lineup here. And um, start Max Pacioretty because he's in a little bit of a different color here on the screen, and that's because he is on a PTO.
Mm-hmm.
Everything I have been hearing and reading, it sounds like he's going to get a 1 year deal, most likely, um, on this team. And where does he fit? Where does he fit on this team? I've heard a lot of talk about Nicholas Robertson getting signed, but maybe not necessarily staying in Toronto all that long. So maybe you move him and then you can kind of fit Pacioretty in here somewhere. How much does Pacioretty have left in the tank? How healthy is he? How many games is he going to play? There's just so many question marks with that right there that I
Yeah.
think it's if you take him off this sheet here, if he wasn't signed for the Leafs, I don't know how much of a big difference it makes. Now, if he's healthy, and he can get back to what he's done in the past, that's a dangerous offensive weapon here that you could put in that third line and potentially really um, spread out the offense. So a lot of changes here on the defense, but I like what I see here. And Riley and Tanev, like you said, Zach, in the first segment, I really think having Chris Tanev with Riley allows Morgan Riley to be a little bit free,
Yeah.
to maybe focus more on the offense and not have to worry as much about the defense because Chris Tanev is there. Simon Benoit did pretty good with Toronto last year. I know a lot of Leafs fans really like him. Um,
Yeah, he was a
so
fan favorite.
yeah, playing with Jake McCabe, and then you've got Ekman Larson, Timothy Liljegren on that third line, third pair. Maybe Hakanpaa gets in there. Maybe see guys move around in that third pair. The goalies. The goalies is the biggest question mark, I think, with this lineup. The
Yeah.
Leafs are going to score goals. That's for sure. Looking at their top six, it's absolutely dangerous. And then even the bottom six does. Ryan Reeves, people say Ryan Reeves can't do anything offensively, and then he had a 3 game point streak with Minnesota, I believe. So he had his like brief little offensive
Little
burst
stint.
there.
Yeah.
He's not there for offense. So anyone relying on Reeves for offense, you're in trouble if that's who you're looking for offense. But I like the forward group. I like the defensive group this year. I think the Leafs are going to be better defensively. It's the goalies that I think are the question marks. Is Woll
Health.
the starter? How healthy is he going to be?
Yeah.
How is he going to play? Is Stolarz going to play like he did last year for Florida? Because if he plays like he did last year for Florida, he could very well take over the starting job. So
Yeah.
Zach, what do you think here? Forwards, defensemen, goalies. What are your question marks with this team, and what do you think about the lines here? Of course, this was made using a depth chart. Is there anything you would change? What do you think about this lineup?
So I'll start here because it makes it easy. Defense and goalies, I'm leaving. I'm not touching. I'm in the same boat as you. What you've got here on the screen, I think, is pretty accurate to what it'll be. Obviously, I think you're probably gonna have some type of rotation with Hawk and Paw, Timmins, and Liljegren into those final spots. Maybe OEL doesn't have a couple good games. Maybe he's liable to come out. But otherwise, that's what it's going to be. I agree there. Stolers, Wall, I'm not changing anything. I've got the same questions you do. Who's going to be healthy? Who's going to play well? Who's going to be able to take over a larger workload? Yet to be determined. I got some stuff for the forwards here. I would change this up a little bit. I see some of the stuff. You brought up Nick Robertson. I don't know if this is a hot take or not. He did sign the contract, but prediction, you want to grab this one and hold on to it, and maybe it pans out. I don't think that this guy starts game one with the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't think he's in this organization by the time game one of the regular season rolls around, October 9th. We've got less than a month to get there. I don't think it happens. He demanded the trade. He wanted the trade. He doesn't see a spot here. I see a difficult opportunity for him to get into this lineup based on what he brings, not based on what is ahead of him necessarily. I heard comments from Tree Living basically saying he shoots and he can score a lot of goals, but what else does he do? That's kind of the struggles that he's had getting in the lineup and staying in the lineup in the past couple of years. I don't think he's going to be here. I don't really think he fits into Berube's style. I don't think that if he didn't warm himself to Sheldon Keefe, how is he going to do so to Craig Berube when he just scores goals? I don't see that fitting here. So I think he's gone. Here's where I go with the rest of the lines. Max Domi, first line left winger, alongside Austin Matthews and William Nylander. That's where I make some changes. First, Max Domi, incredible chemistry alongside Austin Matthews last year. Saw it into the playoffs. That was where he played some of his best hockey, not just in Toronto, but in the last couple of years, was alongside Austin Matthews. And no doubt, you put yourself beside a guy who's going to score 70 goals here, like, you're probably going to be able to put some points together and look pretty good making some of those plays. William Nylander I put over on that other side. I think he's one of the best right wingers in the National Hockey League. NHL Network or whatever it was put out a ranking the other day. He was 2 spots ahead of Marner. He was 8th on the list, I believe. Mitch Marner was number 10. I tend to agree with that. I think he's the guy here, and I feel like that's a position that could work out for him. The other way that I would look at it with him, I'm not even going to dig into the lineup, but I would put him on the third line and put him with a bunch of random people and kind of just say, hey, do your own thing, but that's like a later in the season situation. I go to the second line. I go Matthew Knies, John Tavares, and Mitch Marner. Tavares and Marner, both of them have played their best hockey together here in Toronto, together on a line. We know what works. Let's keep it simple. I know JT is struggling to keep up, but even when he got put with Marner for brief periods last year, they looked good. And guess what? Matthew Knies is the guy on the other side who's just going to say, I'm going to go get the puck. I'm going to park my ass in front, and I'm going to bang home pucks. I'm going to win battles, and I'm going to get it to you too. I think that's how that line works out. Rest of this is where things get interesting. Okay, Max Pacioretty is not going anywhere above the third line. I think he could fit in there, but he's not going above the third line. I feel like he might get an opportunity to start there, so let's throw him third line left wing. And here's one of my other predictions I have. Easton Cowan will be playing with the Toronto Maple Leafs this season. I think he makes this team. I think he makes it past the 10-game stint, and I think he sticks around. He looks like a kid who is going to be capable of making that jump. He has played a lot of hockey over the last little while. He's been playing world stuff. He's been training with these NHL players throughout the entire summer. Incredible season in London. He went to the Mem Cup. Like, he's experienced all of this stuff over the last year. And throw in the fact that he played a bunch of games with the Maple Leafs last year already. So you throw in the extra physical growth as well as the mental, emotional, all that kind of development on top of it. I think he's going to be ready. Could be proven wrong there, but that's kind of where I see it. I would be interested to see what he looks like as the third line center. So I throw him in there. I throw Calle Yarncroke over on the right side. Now you've got some veteran guys alongside the kid. You give him an opportunity to learn, develop alongside them, get some people to lean on there. Who knows? You get some speedy guys with Yarncroke and Cowan, a little bit slower with Pacioretty, and maybe some of the health isn't there, but the health's not there. You rotate him out, right? Like, you find other opportunities. Then I go to the fourth line. This is where things get just disgusting. Bobby McMahon, I think, needs to be in this lineup. I see him as the fourth line left winger. I like Connor Dewar. I kind of see a situation where it's him and Reeves and Holmberg and Reeves filtering into that lineup somehow, whether it's Reeves out and then the other two are in, or Holmberg out and then Dewar and Reeves are in, like whatever it's going to be to make that work. But I feel like there's going to be some cycle of those guys in there. I could see David Kampf potentially being moved here very quickly into this season, let's say. I don't know if it's before game one, but quickly, based on contract, what he was signed to, just the cap hit that he's going to face. And if you've got these young kids that you think can do probably close to what he can do at less money, I'm just going to look to them, because we're in a tight cap situation here as the season goes along. You need every dollar you can get. That might be a spot to look at to kind of move some guys out, save some dollars, and maybe look to allocate it elsewhere. So it's kind of how I see the lineup going. It's like not too far off of where you have, and I actually don't really disagree with anything you've got in here. The only thing I would actually just push back on is just like Nick Robertson. I don't see in this lineup. Other than that, I really, if someone told me that this was going to be the lineup, I'd say like, okay, like that makes sense. But other than that, like, it's just Nick Robertson. That's the guy. I just don't see him here.
Yeah, well, I've heard a lot of that. I've heard a lot of people in Leafs Nation, like, they're ready to show Robertson the door. So I guess he's kind of outworn his welcome a little bit here in Toronto. Nylander as a center. See, these are not lines that I would go with.
Right.
What I decided to do with the possible lineup is to kind of use depth charts to make the possible lineup, because, like you said, Easton Cowan, if he makes this team, that completely changes everything here. That's because he's not even on this list. So guys come in the preseason and surprise and make lineups. So, of course, that's why it's called the possible lineup, because
Yeah, for sure.
it's probably going to look much different on opening night. Now we get to team future bets here. And this is really interesting because most of the time I'm saying Stanley Cup, Conference, President's Trophy, Division, I'm not interested because I'm not going to be pulling the trigger on 10 different teams to win the Stanley Cup. That's just not something I would do. Looking at it here, I wouldn't say win President's Trophy. For me, honestly, I'm not going to really be looking to bet someone to win the President's Trophy because basically I'm saying I hope you finish first in the regular season so that you fall apart in the playoffs. And
Yeah.
I really don't want to wish that upon anybody.
Yep.
So President's Trophy I'm not interested in. Win Division is really interesting. I really like the Berube signing. and I really think he's going to have a huge impact with this Toronto Maple Leafs team. Yes, they're in a very tough division, but I think this team wins the Atlantic. I do. So I would be pulling the trigger on win division at plus 270. I think is a pretty nice price
Mm-hmm.
for the Leafs to win the Atlantic Conference and Stanley Cup. I want to see how things start, how the season starts here. For me, when it comes to pulling the trigger on the Stanley Cup, I cashed with the Panthers last year. I pulled the trigger in the middle of the season, plus 1,000 with the Panthers. So, looking at it preseason here, as high as I am on this Leafs team, of course, we've all seen the Leafs in the postseason, and we all know how long it's been. So, I'm not going to go into that. But I'm not ready to go all in with this Leafs team and pull the trigger on them to win the cup. But I do like them to win the division, make playoffs. Um, I'm never going to recommend someone to bet a minus 475, but I don't see how this Leafs team misses the playoffs. So if you want to get creative with it, you can. 102 and a half points. The Leafs had 102 last year. So uh, right on the nose here, the same number. Um, I would lean with over. I like the Leafs to win the division. I think they can get to 104, 105 points at least. So I would lean with the over. And then that's about it here. So haven't pulled the trigger on anything, but if I'm betting future bets for the Leafs, it's to win the division and over 102 and a half points. Zach,
Uh,
team future bets. Is this the year? Should we be pulling the trigger on the Leafs to win the Stanley Cup? Has the time finally come?
Not right now. I would say if you're going to bet on the Leafs to win the Stanley Cup, I would probably wait. I don't. Part of it is just because, like, let's say they win the first 5 games in a row to start the season. How different is that number going to be than plus 1,300? Like, it's not going to take like this drastic change in that first 5 games where you're going to sit there and go, oh my God, I can't believe I missed that number, at least from like a percentage wise here of the change. I don't think it's going to be that much. It's going to move, but not enough. Maybe you start to dig into the season. What are they going to go 10-0, 20-0? Like, that's not going to happen with this team, especially these guys. Like, come on, it's the Maple Leafs. It's not going to happen. We're not going to get there. I think that you probably still have an equal or similar opportunity as the season progresses to get that number. If they start poor, you can jump on maybe a better number as it goes along. President's Trophy, no interest there really. Conference was intriguing to me at first, but not at plus 650. Like, I just kind of look at there's way too many other options. I do agree that they win the division. I think that they will do that. The only thing is I personally just can't jump on that plus 270 as of right now. I'm looking at them as, like, I still think Tampa is live to win the division. I still think that the Bruins are live to win the division here. Like, I feel like the Panthers could run this back and win this division. I think the Leafs get it, but I don't think that those other teams are as far off as maybe we've looked at them. Like Tampa has kind of gotten this, they made these weird moves, they got older, whatever. They still have Vasilevsky. They still have Victor Hedman. They've got Braden Point. Like, they made other moves. Nikita Kucherov's still there. John Cooper. Like, come on. Tell me that team is that much worse. You know, Boston, they're still the Boston Bruins every single year. Plus 270 doesn't do it. Outside of that, I mean, I'm pretty much in the same position as you looking at the rest of these. Like, yeah, I think they make the playoffs. I'm not betting minus 475 because you know what the hell would happen to me, Terry, if I bet on this team to make the playoffs at minus 475? They would miss the playoffs, and then it would be double whammy for me. So I'm just not doing that. The point totals, the only other thing that I kind of thought about, and I don't want to bet it at plus 190, but I thought about it from a prediction standpoint, I could see them going over 110. I could see them having one of those drastic swing years where Berube comes in, things click, the goalie works, Matthews is the captain, everybody's going nuts. Mitch Marner it comes out, he's fighting for his contract, he's fighting for his salary. William Nylander's comfy, he's got his contract, and this team just goes over the top and gets like 113 points. You know, I could see that. Plus 190, not intriguing. And I think least points in the NHL is going to be saved yet again for San Jose Sharks and some of those other teams. It's not for the Toronto Maple Leafs.
I have the same. So for team future bets, I've got um, the same bets for every team. So yeah, of course, I didn't even talk about least points in the NHL
Yeah,
because
fair.
that would not fit the Leafs here.
Yeah.
I that's I don't see that happening at all. It's pretty much impossible. But now that I've said that, we'll see what. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, and if you did pull the trigger on Leafs to make the playoffs at -475 and they missed it, at least you become famous. I'm pretty sure. I don't know if
I
that's how you
guess.
want to become famous, but I'm pretty sure you would be talked about a lot.
I would agree.
We'll go to this segment here before we finish off the show. I'll just kind of briefly touch on what the players did last year. Austin Matthews goal totals at 57 and a half. And that's a very high goal total. Um, he got 69 last year, 40 the season before that, 60 the season before that. So he's he's passed it. He's passed 57 and a half in two of the last three seasons. Um, I just can't pull the trigger on someone to get 58 goals. That's just a little bit too high for me. Matthews at 101 and a half points, same deal. 107 points last year, 85 the season before that,
Mhm.
106 the season before that. So he had a down year in 22-23, but if you think Matthews is going to have a similar season to last year or 21-22, then he could hit both of these totals. John Tavares, 29 and a half goals here. He had 29 last season, 36 the season before that, and 27 the season before that. Point total, 67 and a half. He had 65 last season, 80 the season before that, 76 the season before that. So two of the last 3 years he's hit this total. For me, though, is I would, if I'm betting Tavares over on points, I would want to know that he's on that second line.
Yeah.
I would want to know that he's not going to be on that third line because if he's on that third line, especially for a decent part of the season, I would more look towards the under in his point total. Mitch Marner, 2021 2022, 35 goals, 97 points, and 72 games played. Last year, 80 games, or sorry, 22-23, 80 games played, 30 goals, 99 points. Last year, he played only in 69 games, 26 goals, 85 points. So a drop off in the regular season compared to the two previous seasons for him. Of course, he did play in less games than 22-23. Now he's in his contract season. Um, are we going to see a huge season for Mitch Marner driving his contract price up? Or is he going to have another down year? Um, I'm not willing to pull the trigger on guessing because I
Mm.
don't know. I don't know what to expect from Marner this year with his future up in the air. Nylander, 38 and a half goals. He's had 40 in back to back seasons, 82 games played in back to back seasons, and 21-22, he had 81 games played. So William Nylander has been dependable when it comes to games played. And when you're looking at a player to bet their player props for the full season, you really want a guy that has stayed healthy. That's very, very important when you're betting these type of things. 40 goals back to back years. Last year, 98 points, 87 the season before that. So goal total he's hit in back to back years, only by 2 goals. So it's been kind of close there. And then Matthew Nyes is the interesting one. 80 games played last year, 15 goals, 35 points. Now his total 19, 18 and a half goals, 48 and a half points. If Matthew Nyes is on that top line, Uh, I'm betting overs on both of these for pretty big
It's fair.
size plays because if he's playing with Austin Matthews, it's going to be really hard not to get 19 goals in the season, 49 points, um, especially with Nyes showing what he can do last year. 21 years old, he's only going to improve, I think, from what we saw last year. So if I'm looking at this list here, I'm not touching Matthews, not touching Tavares or Marner. I would look at Nylander goals, although it's not enough for me to pull the trigger on it. But Matthew Nyes, I think he's the guy to look to here if you do see him playing on that top line. But even if he's on the second line, uh, he's still playing with very good players. So for me, it's Matthew Nyes on this list. Zach, player future bets, and then we got one more. We'll talk about player futures. What do you think here for these goals and point totals?
Well, I think the Matthews one is one that I would not want to touch personally to bet. I could see him finishing with 60 again. I could see him finishing with 55. And neither of those seem like that crazy to me. So 57.5, good. The one that I am interested in here is the 101.5. I don't know that I want to jump in on minus 115 on the over to be betting it right now. Like, I would be interested, and if I did some more digging into it and projections, I could actually potentially be pulling the trigger there. But here's why. You want to be considered one of the best players in the world. You want to be the Connor McDavid, the Nathan McKinnon, the Nikita Kucherov, Leon Draisaitl were thrown in those conversations. You know, Terry, how many points do those guys get every year? 120, 125, 130, 140 points. And we're looking at this guy 106 points. Now, it's not to diminish 106 points. That's incredible. And he scored 70 goals. But you want to be this take over the game dominant type player who can do all that. A couple of years ago, Connor McDavid scored 60 goals and was putting up still outrageous numbers of points because he's just taking over the game in every single facet. You want to do that. You want to be paid that money. You want to be the captain of the team, the leader, the franchise. You already are, but you want to push yourself to that next tier. You got to start kind of ramping up some of those numbers. I could see a 110, 115, 120. And guess who we trained with all summer? Connor McDavid, right? Like you start adding some of those tools, you start developing some of the stuff to your game. I could see that taking that jump. Tavares, I'm just gonna skip over it, but briefly why I am. I got no idea what's gonna happen with this guy from a speed perspective. He took steps back in each of the last couple of years. No idea what's going to happen this year. And the other part of it is where we had kind of gone with the lines. Is he going to play on the second line? Is he going to play on the third line? Is he going to be moved to the wing? Who's his center going to be if he's moved to the wing? Is Berube going to want him on power play 1? Is he going to go on a power play 2, or are they going to play 30 seconds? Like, I got no idea what this guy's going to do. Mitch Marner, goals, leave it. I think it's probably fair and wouldn't really look to bet it one way or the other. Points, I would look to bet the over on this. Contract year, this is a guy who loves to throw it in people's faces and kind of say, I told you so. He wants to fight with the Toronto media. He wants to fight with the Toronto fans and say, you didn't love me enough. You didn't pamper me enough. You didn't appreciate what I did for you. At 94.5 points, I think this guy's going to want to put up 100 plus in his contract year. You're going to want to go sign a contract. This is the year for him to put up 100 plus. I know this is a little bit boring. I'm sorry. The Nylander 38.5, probably fair. Like, I think he hits 40, but I'm not betting minus 115 for him to score 1.5 more goals than what he's listed at. The 92.5, I would look to alt markets and look for him to hit 100 plus. I would not be looking at the 92.5 to minus 115. I would go and search anything I could to find 100 plus on this guy and find him that way, because I feel like that would be much more intriguing. Like, the difference between him getting 93 and 100 is probably going to be worth it to find those numbers out there. If he clears the minus 115, is he not going to go to the 100 plus? I feel like it's there. Matthew Nyes, I'm with you on both these accounts. You tell me what line he's playing on, I'm going over on both. I will play both of these, 18.5 and 48.5. I could see 20 goals, 60 points. And that's smaller margins, but even if he's going to be locked in at a second line left winger position, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, Austin Matthews, John Tavares. Those are the kinds of guys he's going to be playing with. We're going over these numbers. That's how I'm kind of looking at these player props right now.
Awesome. Yeah. So pretty much in agreement for a lot of these.
Yeah.
And we'll final segment. I couldn't fit them all on one page because at least there's so many different future bets to look at. So some of these are futures here with Berube and then 3 Matthews ones. But the goalies that we've already discussed, the goalies are so interesting here. Most teams only have one goalie listed, but here we've got Stolarz at
Well,
17 and a half wins and Wool at 28 and a half. If I had some inside knowledge on how these goalies were going to be used, then I could make a bet here. But without knowing anything, I can't recommend someone pulling a trigger on either one of these because if Stolarz comes out here and has a great season, Wool's not hitting 29 wins. Stolarz could play in more of the games, but if Wool struggles, if Stolarz both goalies struggle, then potentially neither one of these could hit their win total. So it's interesting having two choices, but I think it makes it a lot more difficult to pull the trigger here. Berube, Jack Adams, because of the seasons the Leafs have been having the last few years, I think it would take a drastic, like you said, Zach, like with just everything going right and having a fantastic season, winning the President's Trophy and just being completely dominant all year. I think it would take a lot of things here for Berube to win the Jack Adams. And then Matthews, no plays for me, but he's going to be in contention for some of these awards, I think. Zach, what do you think here? Goalie wins, player awards. What are your thoughts here?
I can't really add anything you haven't said just there about the awards with the goalies or what we talked about with them earlier about the goalies in terms of these wins. Like, who's going to be healthy? Like, Joseph Woll under 28 and a half wins, the under actually might be the only way that I can look at this at all because of health. And, like, we don't know the deployment that they're going to be looking at here. We don't know who's going to be the hot hand. We don't know who's going to be healthy. Don't want to touch it. Matthews Rocket would not want to do that again at plus 135. Would more look at Matthews Hart. I would shop around, but like a plus 900, plus 1,000 if you get in there. Like, I don't mind it. And I would rather bet that than the Selke because I think he's going to score a lot of goals. And if he has a Selke type season, I think that the voters would rather give him the Hart than give him the Selke. So if he scores a lot, is really good, and wears the C, I think that the voters would give him the Hart instead. And if you're going to get it at that close, I'd be looking at the Hart. The Berube Jack Adams, I don't have interest in. I would need a drastically different number. Maybe I'm approaching it wrong, but the reason is the path. First, I look at what the Leafs have to do, right? The Leafs would have to take huge steps from what they did with Sheldon Keefe. Like, they put up 102 points last year. So you're going to probably look at, okay, they need to be 110 plus points. Well, then you're going to win the divisions. You're going to win maybe the conference. Maybe you win the President's Trophy in order for him to do that. That's step one. And at that point, you might as well bet some of the stuff you pulled up already, Terry. You might as well bet 110 plus points and to win the conference and to win the division. Like, you might as well just go bet those. Because then the other thing that needs to happen is that Sheldon Keefe and the New Jersey Devils can't take a step, right? Like, you need to look at Travis Green and the Ottawa Senators. They also can't be as good. Andrew Burnett and the Nashville Predators, they need to take a step back from last year. Like, those other teams also basically have to hit pause, take steps back, or take a marginal step forward, parlayed with Sheldon Keefe or with Sheldon Keefe with Craig Berube taking those steps forward with Toronto, and the path to get that is not plus 850 plus 900 to me. It's I can't even put a number on it. It's much higher. That's not available to bet, so I just don't have interest in some of these players, player futures. It would only be Matthews Hart if I could find the right number. Plus 900, not quite enough, but it's close. I will tell you that honestly.
Awesome. I completely agree. Yeah, the Jack Adams is usually going to go to, let's say, Utah makes the playoffs.
Right.
Then there you go. Or if Buffalo makes the playoffs, there you go. It's the Jack Adams is most likely going to go to that team that does something big.
Yeah.
And the Leafs, I think it would have to be like 125. Like I think they'd have to have like this like huge season to win
Yeah.
for Brewby to win the Jack Adams. So we're in agreement there. That's for sure. Zach, anything you want to say before we finish off the show?
No, I that's it. I appreciate you having me as always. Look forward to doing this again next year, hopefully, and hopefully people enjoyed it and are able to take something away from this.
Awesome. Perfect. Thanks. Everyone go give Zach a follow at ZachPhil on
Thank you.
Twitter/X. And we will see you guys on the next preview show. Thanks for watching, guys.